You think you know about cruel rulers? You've heard of mad kings and tyrannical emperors? But what if I told you there was a sultan so consumed by paranoia and depravity that he committed an act of mass murder so monstrous it's been whispered about in horror for centuries? This is the story of Sultan Ibrahim I, a man who, in a single night of rage, ordered all 280 women of his harem to be tied in sacks and drowned in the sea. A ruler so obsessed with fur, he nearly bankrupted an empire to sleep on sable skins. A sovereign who dispatched agents across the land with a golden cast of a cow's vulva, searching for a woman fat enough to satisfy his bizarre desires. This isn't just a story of a cruel monarch. It's the story of how a lifetime of terror can forge a monster. You're about to discover the shocking, bizarre, and terrifying truth behind the man they called Ibrahim the Mad. From the golden cage that shattered his mind, to the depraved obsessions that horrified his court, and finally, to the night of the mass drowning that sealed his horrifying legacy. The history books are afraid to tell you what really happened in the Topkapi Palace. We are not. Part 1. The Cage That Forged a Monster. Before he was a sultan, he was a prisoner. Not in a dungeon, but in a place far more psychologically damaging, the Kafis, or the Gilded Cage. This was a luxurious suite of rooms inside the Topkapi Palace, but it was a prison nonetheless. A beautiful death row for potential heirs to the Ottoman throne. For 22 years, Ibrahim lived in the constant, silent shadow of death, listening for the footsteps of the executioners who had already strangled his 4 older brothers on the orders of the reigning sultan, his ruthless sibling Murad IV. Every sunrise was a shock, every sunset a potential final breath. His life was spared only because his mother, Kosem Sultan, convinced Murad that Ibrahim was too mentally unstable to ever be a threat. She saved his life by arguing he was a harmless imbecile. Think about that. His only ticket to survival was to be seen as a broken, witless fool. But here's where the story takes its first truly bizarre turn. When Sultan Murad died in 1640 and the highest officials of the empire came to the Kafis to proclaim Ibrahim the new master of the world's most powerful empire, he refused to come out. He barricaded the door, convinced it was an elaborate trap to finally execute him. His terror was so absolute that only one thing could convince him. His mother had to present him with the cold, lifeless corpse of his brother. Only then, staring at the body of the man that he had feared his entire life, did Ibrahim finally believe he was safe. He emerged from that cage not as a triumphant king, but as a man completely unhinged, a volatile cocktail of lifelong terror and newfound absolute power. The empire was now in the hands of a man whose only education had been in fear, and the lessons he learned were about to be taught to everyone else. Part 2. The Reign of the Fool of Furs and the Lust for Giants. With the chains of the cage broken, Ibrahim's broken mind was free to indulge every whim, and his whims were as strange as they were sinister. His reign quickly descended into a carnival of depravity. He developed a ravenous obsession with fur, earning him the nickname Le Fou de Fourrure, the Fool of Furs. He lined entire rooms of the palace with priceless nynx and sable. He insisted on making love on lavish beds made entirely of sable skins. This obsession was so all-consuming that it nearly bankrupted the empire, forcing him to levy punishing new taxes, not for war or public works, but to fund his ever-growing collection of animal pelts. But wait, it gets so much worse. His desires turned from the material to the carnal, and it was here that his madness became truly monstrous. He had a particular fetish for morbidly obese women. In one of the most insane episodes of his reign, he had his agents dispatched across the empire with a single bizarre command: to find him the fattest woman in the world. They eventually returned with an enormous Armenian woman whom he gleefully named Sugar Lump. He showered her with gifts and power, making her his favorite concubine and a governor general. But his cruelty was even more potent than his fetishes. He became infatuated with the beautiful daughter of the Grand Mufti, the highest religious authority in the land. When the holy man rightfully refused the sultan's advances, Ibrahim simply had the girl kidnapped. He raped her for several days before casting her out and sending her back to her horrified father. It was a message to the entire empire. Not even God's law could stand against his desires. The man who had been a powerless prisoner
now saw every person in his empire as an object for his use, and he was just getting started.
Part 3. The Whisper, the Rage, and the Drowning Sea. Here is where the story of Ibrahim the Mad plunges into the depths of pure horror. The harem, a gilded world of hundreds of beautiful concubines, had become the stage for his most depraved fantasies. But it was also a viper's nest of rumors and jealousy. According to one chilling account, a whisper reached the Sultan's ear, a rumor that one of his concubines had been compromised by an outsider, that a woman who belonged to him had been with another man. For a mind as fractured and paranoid as Ibrahim's, this single unproven rumor was like a match thrown on gunpowder. He didn't launch an investigation, he didn't seek proof. He descended into a fit of rage so absolute that it demanded a conclusion of unimaginable scale. He declared that he would not risk being dishonored by a single unfaithful woman. Therefore, he would punish them all. What followed was a night of organized slaughter. His chief black eunuch and his guards descended upon the harem. The women, who had been living in luxury, were dragged from their chambers. Screams echoed through the marble halls as they realized this wasn't a punishment, it was an extermination. According to the accounts, each of the 280 women was systematically bound, forced into a weighted sack, and loaded onto boats. The horrifying procession made its way out into the Bosphorus strait, the dark waterway separating Europe and Asia. Then, one by one, they were cast into the cold, dark water. 280 women, drowned like kittens in a bag, sacrificed to a madman's paranoid fantasy.
Part 4. The Empire Strikes Back. You cannot drown 280 women, many from powerful families, and expect to remain in power, even if you were the Sultan. The mass drowning was the final unforgivable act. It was so monstrous that it united every faction that Ibrahim had alienated. The Janissaries, the elite soldiers of the empire, were disgusted. The religious authorities, led by the same Grand Mufti whose daughter Ibrahim had raped, were ready for vengeance. And, most importantly, his own mother, Qasem Sultan, who had protected him his entire life, finally realized her son was a monster who had to be put down. In 1648, they made their move. The Grand Mufti issued a fatwa calling for Ibrahim's deposition. The Janissaries stormed the palace. The man who had been a prisoner, then a god, was now a prisoner once more. They dragged him from the throne and threw him back into the one place he understood, the kafes. He was returned to the same gilded cage where his madness had been born. For 10 days, he raged and screamed from his old prison, his pleas for mercy echoing through the palace that had once been his playground. But there was no mercy left for him. A second fatwa was issued, this one authorizing his execution.